Greetings. This PowerPoint presentation and this YouTube video are directed at the employees of the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State because we can't really understand why you are doing what you're doing. We will get to who we are later. We're just giving you an opportunity to lessen the consequences of an investigation by the Department of Justice about your decision making. You might be wondering, how can you be liable for anything just doing your job? Well, you can be if you're doing your job and you know something is wrong. This is stated in your code of ethics. So this is what you should be doing in the K-1 visa process. You can Google this. I'm not going to read it for you just to cut down on the time of this video. You can pause this screen, but these are 14 principles of ethical conduct for federal employees. So we have issues with number 1, number 5, number 8, and number 11, and number 13. So the whole idea of this K-1 visa process is that the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State are supposed to approve the K-1 visa cases for legitimate couples in loving relationships, which is what you people call bona fide. You're also supposed to deny the cases of the bad people. Approve the good people, deny the bad people. It's pretty simple. There are 4 possible outcomes of every fiancé visa case. Number 1, couples who are in a legitimate, loving relationship and their case gets approved. That's good. Couples who are criminal and fraudulent and posing as a real couple and they get denied. That's also good. Couples who are criminal, fraudulent, and presenting themselves as bona fide and they get approved. That's bad. That happens thousands of times every year. Couples who are in a legitimate loving relationship and they get denied. That's bad. Now, there's some people that used to look at that as a necessary evil back when there were only 2%, 2 out of every 100 cases getting denied. Why is it a necessary evil? Well, if you can't identify the criminals, you can't very well approve every case, because if you approved every case, the country would be overrun by criminals and by terrorists. So some cases have to be denied just to make it look like you have policies and procedures that actually work. So this is what is actually happening in the K-1 visa process. Notice the new topic screen. It's in there for most new topics. This is the I-129F. Shouldn't be a surprise to anyone what this form is. This form is used to create indicators. Indicators are either things that are on the form or they are derived from something on the form. And these are deemed to distinguish the good people from the bad people. This form alone is designed to, analyze the cases and distinguish good people from bad people. So let's take a look at the indicators. Now we're going to take a look at difference in age because it's pretty easy to represent graphically and talk about. So let's imagine that somewhere when somebody at the USCIS decided, let's take a look at age indicators and decide what we're going to do with them. So maybe you have some database administrators and some IT people sitting in a conference room and you're having a meeting with your leadership team and you're going to discuss how to use various indicators. So we're going to take a look at age here. So somebody from the IT department queries a database and uses a difference in 3 years as a difference in age, and it comes back and it marks 80% of the population. Then somebody says no, can't use 3 years. Okay, so if you guess at 10 years and see what percent of the population that results in the query, and maybe that's too high too. And then finally, if you use 15 years, and these numbers are just an example, that gets you what you're looking for in a historical sense. This would be back, in 2015 or before then. Because if you take a normal population of people and you use 15 years, that's 2 standard deviations out, which means 2 standard deviations by the laws of statistics means that you're indicating about 2% of the population. So whether or not the government wants to call this the use of the science of statistics, it's the science of statistics. What you're looking at here is normal distribution curves. And you're sitting in a conference room querying these, querying a population. Maybe the population is every case from 2015. And you're just analyzing how you're going to use age indicator. And the idea is to use indicators or markers on a smaller percent of the population. And you might weight these indicators. You might say 3 years age difference is a weight of 1, 10 years is a weight of 2, 15 years is a weight of 3. So now let's look at what's actually happening. This is the San Bernardino terrorists. This is a case that's it's a pretty important event in United States history because this is, we don't have very many domestic terrorists, and B, these domestic terrorists, one of them came into the country on a Fiance visa, which is very alarming because a Fiance visa is usually deemed as the fastest, easiest way to get into the country, the fastest visa process. So for criminals, they look at it as the easiest way to get into a country. So let's take a look at this guy. He's born in Chicago. He's a U.S. citizen, but he's, going all jihad on us, and he wants to kill some Americans. So what does he do? He goes up to the site www.findajihadiwifewhocanhandleanautomaticweapon.com, and he starts looking for people. He's not going to fall in love with someone. That's not the point here. His point is to beat the system, and any 10-year-old could beat the system. So he goes looking for people in this at this site, and he finds somebody who was born 336 days apart. This person also shares the same language, the same religion, the same everything. There's nothing about these people that are different. If you look at the left, that's the original I-129F form of this couple, and we have it, and there are no indicators on this form. The only thing different is she lied about her address. But you guys didn't know that, so that's not a difference. So it's not an accident that he picked out somebody who's 336 days apart. The idea is to beat the system, and any 10-year-old could beat your system. This is how insane the system is that you are using. If you wonder how did terrorists get through the system, it's easy. It was very easy for them. So they have absolutely no indicators, same religion, native language, social class, age, nationality, and of course they both wanted to kill Americans, but that's not on the form, and they would have lied about it if it was on the form. And this is the result of that. We have 14 Americans who are dead, no longer with us because of government incompetence, because they designed a system that can't possibly identify this target group. And we'll look at other target groups. Plus there are 22 people injured, and I don't know how many of them are in wheelchairs or have some disability from being shot by these people. New topic. This is, we're going to talk about the C-SPAN video where the U.S. Senate Committee on Immigration summoned the leadership teams from the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State. So we encourage everybody to take a look at this video because why? Because it's not every day that your leadership team from the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State both come into your office, maybe at the USCIS or maybe at the U.S. consulates, and explain to you everything that's actually intended to happen, okay? So the way you find this video is you just Google C-SPAN video, Senate Committee on Immigration, and the name of this meeting or hearing is Fiance Visa Fraud. That'll bring you right to the video. So we have a bunch of screen prints from this video. Basically what you have here is the legislative branch, the Senate Committee on Immigration, summoning in the leadership team from the executive branch to explain what's going on. How did the San Bernardino terrorist event happen? And some other stuff. So what we see on this slide is the chair of this committee is swearing in all of the leadership team. And the leadership team is Donald Neufeld, David Donahue, David Renaud, Matthew Emmerich, and Greg Navarro. You should pause and read the screen if you want to look up something that was said in the video, because this text that you see underneath the C-SPAN video is actually, it's not just text, it links to the actual time that that's being said in the video. So pause this and play with it a little bit, and you'll be able to use this functionality. So this is Senator Ted Cruz, and I'm starting here. It's later in the meeting because this is one of the most important things that are asked, and I'm going in the order that I want to go in instead of the order that the actual hearing took place. So Senator Cruz pointed out that one of the San Bernardino terrorists entered the United States on a K-1 visa. She lied about her Pakistani address. They both lied about having met in person, and he said, what went wrong and what have we done to fix it? Now keep in mind, this particular C-SPAN video that we're looking at here is the second video like this. There was another hearing immediately, or I mean closer to the actual San Bernardino attack, and this is a follow-up meeting. In the first meeting, when the leadership team was summoned, they had a bunch of action items on things to do, and this meeting is the follow-up to say what's been implemented, what's been done since our first meeting. So he's asking what went wrong and what have we done to fix it. So like I said, everybody should watch this. Even the senators should watch this. Why should the senators watch it? Because they didn't see the entire meeting. Some senators did the intros and left and never came back. Some senators came in late and left early. And a couple senators, Cruz and Tillis, came in an hour and 20 minutes late. So, no senator saw this entire hearing. So if any senators are watching this, even though it's not directed at senators, they should watch this entire C-SPAN video to see what took place in a hearing that they were supposed to be witnessing. So Emmerich replies to this, there were no national security indicators on the I-129F. What a surprise. The terrorists, they didn't come out and say that they're terrorists, The incident was reviewed by the USCIS, and they added more information to the form, which would be the I-129F, and they conducted more training to determine credibility. And he also said that we do not have the infrastructures overseas to verify addresses. In other words, a terrorist could put whatever address they want on the form, the terrorist, the Fiance, and the government can't do anything about it because they can't verify overseas addresses. So if you picture where do terrorists come from, well, they come from terrorist harboring countries like, Pakistan and Syria and places like that. But they don't have to put down an address from where they came and give the government any kind of flag that they might be a terrorist. So Senator Cruz also asked if the same person used the same address again, would we be able to catch them? And Emmerich, we had some of our experts, our psychology experts, and we're going to go over who we are and who our experts are at the end of this video. So you'll see who our experts are. They're very well qualified people. But we had them look at the way he answered this question. So he stumbles around and he says it depends on whether there was a national security indicator on the address. Well, chances are there's not one, because if they're terrorists, they're not going to put down a Pakistani address. This is just so insane. You people need to understand how insane this system is. So the way we look at it, Emmerich lied. He lied by not telling the whole truth. The truth is that any 10-year-old can beat the system, and that any terrorist can easily enter the country, and any other target group can easily enter the country on a Fiance visa, and you people cannot detect the bad people. So now we're backing up a little bit in the meeting. At the beginning, I wanted to make those two key points, and now we're going to take a look at some other things that happened in the meeting. So this is Senator Feinstein. She's a California senator, and she's also asking about the San Bernardino attack. This happened earlier, keep in mind. So Emmerich replies that the San Bernardino reviews have been done. She asked about the reviews. Are the reviews done? And additional measures in the screening process have been identified. Also, forms were modified and interviewers were trained on the changes. So it's basically the same answer that he gave later on to Cruz, but like I said, no senator saw the whole meeting and they didn't know what questions were already asked. So Feinstein came in late, left early, and that's why we think that the Senate Committee on Immigration saw a smoke and mirror show here from the leadership team and didn't realize that they were seeing it because they didn't attend the whole hearing. So the word is out. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Department of State use an indicator system that cannot possibly identify terrorists. So this is a huge, national security risk, but it's there. So, and I took a look at this. If we have the I-129F from this couple, I mentioned that, and also if you're a USCIS person, you probably recognize this form on the internet where people can go up and check the status of their case. So, we checked the status of the case, and these people just flew through the system. There were no indicators. They went to a consulate interview, and we'll go over that in a couple slides. So, like I said, any 10-year-old could beat this system. It's just easy. All you have to do is avoid indicators. People who fall in love and who are, actual bona fide couples, they don't worry about things that, difference in age, or you have a different religion, or you don't speak the same language, because there's tools now that help you speak the same language. I mean, Google Translate on a smartphone can translate in real time. If you're in Italy and you can't read the menu, all you have to do is hold up your smartphone, use Google Translate, and scroll it down the screen, and in real time it acts like a magnifying glass that translates things from Italian to English, or from Italian to Chinese, whatever you want. So there are tools now that, a difference in language shouldn't be that big of an indicator. So we go back to Senator Feinstein, and she asks about marriage fraud. So now this is a little bit, this is a terminology thing that I need to straighten out here. There are 4 target groups. We saw them earlier, the bad people, but I didn't stop and talk about them. The first target group that we're talking about is terrorists. The second one is sham marriages. So she calls this marriage fraud. The fourth one has also been called marriage fraud. So that's why we want to straighten this out. So we're going to call this marriage fraud that she's talking about sham marriages, because that's what the press calls it. Things got out into the press. So she's asking about, marriage fraud here, and I went back in the video to put something important here that Navarro. So Navarro said that fiancé visa applications are given the most scrutiny of any types of visas. Why? Because they're designed to be the easiest way to get into the country. Okay, that's why they have the most scrutiny. That's why this video that's being addressed to you, employees of the Department of State and Department of Homeland Security, that's why we're doing this, is because you're messing up this process. And I put a little smoke and mirrors thing in here. That's what the Senate committee heard, from their answer. Okay, this is the case that Feinstein is inquiring about, and this happened in downtown LA. If you take a look at the picture on the left, you see ICE people and HSI people walking into a building to bust some people. And this is 80 Lake, which is, it's not 3000 Lake, it's 80, which, indicates that it's right in the heart of downtown. It's where, the north addresses turn to south addresses, right in the heart. And this couple, it's not a couple, I'm sorry, it's a father-daughter team. They decide, hey, the government's not very smart, and we can do this and make millions of dollars, and it's really easy to do. All we have to do is use our heads, because any 10-year-old could beat this system. Okay, so this is a father-daughter team, and they're going to set up a law office at this 80, South Lake in downtown LA, a very prestigious law building where there's a lot of law offices. They're not lawyers. They don't have a law firm, but they're just going to, rent a space and put a sign on the window that says, whatever immigration law firm, and they're going to make millions of dollars. And the way they make millions of dollars, they're doing something illegal. That's why they're making so much money, and they don't want to go to jail. They don't want to go to prison, because this is a federal offense. So they're going to be very careful in matching people up. So when they match up, mostly, most of these were Chinese American men, and then the spouses came from China. But there's some that were the other way around too. So what they're doing is finding Chinese Americans and matching them up with somebody from China who would pay for citizenship to come to the United States. So they're making as much money as they can from the Chinese citizen, $20,000-$30,000 a pop, up to $60,000-$80,000 a pop. But they have to be very careful matching these people up. So they're going to speak the same language, and that's in China that's not automatic. You have you're not going to match somebody up from Guangzhou to somebody from Beijing, because Guangzhou and Hong Kong and a couple other cities in Guangdong province, way down south, they speak Cantonese. So they're not going to hook them up with somebody from Beijing who speaks Mandarin. And even inside of cities, like, I worked in Shanghai, and if you're going to go to lunch with a bunch of people and you want to go to an old restaurant that's, that's well established, it's from a Shanghai family, you want to take somebody to lunch with you who can speak Shanghainese, which is a dialect of Mandarin, because Mandarin people won't be able to read the menu, if you don't take somebody with you who speaks Shanghainese. So they're going to be very careful about language, about age, about religion. And, a lot of these things are easy to do in China. Same social status, same education. But, they're not going to have any indicators at all. Nothing. Nada. So, you might wonder, how can it be that the whole of government approach and the indicator system allowed all these people to get through? It's because the whole of government approach has zero chance of ever identifying anybody in this particular target group, which is sham marriages, because they're being matched to intentionally avoid indicators. Any 10-year-old could beat the system. This is how insane it is. When you look at your leadership team, you should just say insane, 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 because they're all insane. So I just clipped a few things from the news about sham marriages to show you how prevalent it is. So the one on the left, it says 22 charged in a probe. Well, if you look down a little bit, in all, almost 1,000 people. So, and then here's 150 indicted. It doesn't say how many people. And then here's another one where 12. If we go down to the next page, 33 charged with sham marriages. Here's a article from January 2016, couple caught in setting up over 100 marriages, and another one 6 charged, and I don't know how many people were involved. Kansas City, you have 30 to 40 marriages. Here's another one where at least 100. Another one in Nigeria. I don't know how many couples that involved, but what you see here is a lot of people are getting through by the hundreds or thousands. That one was 1,000. And then also you have this page here. These are all individual cases, which they're hard to find in the press because they're not that newsworthy when one couple gets charged with a sham marriage. But, you have to really look for them. So here's one in 2017, Armenian among detainees charged in marriage fraud. Feds crack down on green card, Austin, Texas. And there's a couple on the right. They actually got a little bit of press. I'm not sure if everybody's heard of this. There's one for, August 2017. Feds, marriage between Hawaii soldier and Slovakian bodybuilder. This was an army guy from Hawaii who married a Slovakian bodybuilder just so she could gain citizenship and compete in the United States. And, they're not even living together. It's a fake marriage. And here's a guy, Fox Lake. This guy was I think he was a former law enforcement guy, but he had felony charges, so he wouldn't be able to go through the background check with the USCIS. And he wanted to get his mistress over here, so he just, set up a sham marriage between his son and his mistress, who were about the same age, and he didn't have a felony conviction. So, he used he used that as a sham marriage to get his mistress in this country. And God knows how many individual cases are. There's thousands of these people too. So here's another thing that Feinstein asked about. So she asked about the San Bernardino attack because it's in her state. She asked about that sham marriage thing because one of the highly publicized one was in her state. She's asking about human trafficking now because, again, a highly publicized thing happened in her state. So she's asking about 274 cases here identified by ICE, and remember that number 274. And these are, human trafficking people that got into the United States on either work visas or fiance visas. So Emmerich replies here that the interviewers were trained to look for human trafficking indicators. And they say, oh, okay. They took that as an answer. I'm a federal government consultant, and I would never take that as an answer. That's just, more smoke and mirrors. They're just giving the Senate, a line, basically. So human trafficking, this is something that was picked up by CNN and the New York Times, both on the same day, January 2016. And it's human traffickers take advantage of failures in the visa system, and human traffickers found to exploit U.S. visas and data sharing failures. So this is something that, it happens that you can see down here, the 274 number from the New York Times, plus an additional 425 family members that came in because the original 274 got in. Now this is something Trump is trying to end now, is chain migration. Just because somebody gains citizenship doesn't mean that the brothers or the mother and father are going to get into the country. That's what Trump wants to end, is chain migration. But it happened here. So you have 425 other people getting into the United States because their human trafficking relatives got into the United States. And here's a screen that just shows you what ICE did in 1 year. This is a report from ICE in fiscal year 2015, and they arrested 1,437 individuals and identified 400 victims of human trafficking who are brought into this country, in some kind of a servitude thing. And this is the lady on the left here is Grace Huang, who is with the Asia Pacific Institute on Gender-Based Violence. She's an advocate for human trafficking victims, and we've communicated with her. She's, high up in this organization, one of the 4 ladies who's really running the place. And she is from panel number 1, and we haven't talked about panel number 1, but we will in the next slide. So this is panel number 1. What you saw before was the leadership team being sworn in. They're panel number 2. Panel number 1 had Grace Huang here in the middle and 2 American citizens on her left and right. And this lady on the left, we have another longer presentation that dedicates a few pages to her. She was shammed by a criminal fiance whose only purpose was to get married, was to come into the United States, gain a green card, and take her for all the money that she could. And the same with the guy on the right, who is a doctor. He's a physician. So he was shammed. You don't have to be stupid to be shammed. These are both intelligent people who are shammed by a fiance. And, that happens. And it's becoming a really big problem now. Now, he was shammed through an arranged marriage. So his fiance's mother and father said, hey, let's fix you up with a doctor, a physician, and you can go over there and take him for as much money as he can, and then you can, claim something and get a divorce and keep your American citizenship or your green card and give us some of the money that you get from him. So that's how people fraud fiancés. So these are 2 articles that appeared on the internet where they point out criminal fiancés. And if you read the one on the left, Americans say immigrants duped them into marriage and claimed abuse to stay in the United States. So what this is it's the result of a law passed by Congress called the IMBRA, which is International Marriage Brokers something law. But if you're in the USCIS or the Department of State and you work at a consulate, if you're a consular officer, you know what this law is, because as soon as a fiance walks into a meeting, you hand him or her a piece of paper that says, hey, if you're ever abused by your American Citizen Petitioner, if you ever find yourself in an abusive relationship, you're in the United States now. You can do something about it. We have laws to protect you. So the IMBRA was put into effect. This happened after, I don't know what year it was several years ago, where a couple of Americans who passed a background check with the USCIS, they married Eastern European ladies. One of them was Russian, I think, and the other one was another former CIS country, former Soviet country. And what happened was these American citizens murdered their wives, their Eastern European wife. So this law went into effect to protect, the fiancés or the wife. If you're in an abusive situation, maybe there was nothing you could do about it in the former, Eastern Europe, but in the United States there is, and now we have a law, the IMBRA, that protects you. So what's happening here is criminal fiancés are using this law to their advantage now. They dupe their U.S. citizen petitioner into getting married, and then they claim abuse, and that allows them to stay in the United States as a permanent resident, or if they're through the citizenship part, it allows them to stay in the United States as a U.S. citizen because this law went into effect. So criminals are using this law as an excuse to separate from their husband or wife and claim abuse. So we're seeing this a lot now. So, the way we look at it, there's a lot of this happening now. There's a whole new criminal group who are, criminal fiancés. And of course, we can't really expect the government to do anything about this or the government to identify these people because the U.S. citizen petitioner doesn't even know that the fiancé is going to turn into a criminal and use this law and maybe take a child away from you, or away from the citizen petitioner, just by saying they're abused. So we don't expect you to identify these types of couples. So, of the first three groups, it'd be nice if there was a way for you to detect the first three criminal groups. But this fourth one, the best way to address this is laws afterwards, after the fact, where, if the U.S. citizen can claim there wasn't any abuse, she's just using that as an excuse, then, some action can be taken by ICE to deport the fiancé or the wife. Okay, this is an organization, Victims of Immigration Fraud, which is voif.org. And this is an organization that was set up just to help people who are being duped by their foreign fiancés. And a lot of times they're being duped and they're using a law to claim abuse and then to stay in the country with a green card or even with citizenship. And there's nothing you can do about it. So this organization was set up to try to help these people from fiancés that are taking advantage of a law that is designed to protect foreign fiancés from abuse. So as you can see here, human trafficking, sham marriage, fraudulent fiancés, and of course terrorists, none of these are being identified by the whole of government approach. How can this be? Because any 10-year-old could beat the system. It's so easy to beat the system. All you have to do is be criminal and match people up, so they don't have any indicators. So this is a new topic. We're talking about a denial quota here. And, for the decade ending in 2015, the denial quota was 2%. Now it's 17%, or 1 in every 6 cases. This is an alarming event here that this happened. Okay, what we're looking at here, the chart you see on the right comes right from the Department of State. This is a screen print from the Department of State. And on the upper left is a spreadsheet that I made that uses some of these numbers in blue, and then I added some more numbers in teal, just by doing some math. So if you want to find this chart, you should look for U.S. Department of State, NIV workload, and FY 2016, which is fiscal year 2016. And then it'll take you right to this chart. And what we're going to do is talk about these numbers for a little bit. So the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State, they both are looking at 10,000 denials every year for K-1 visas because they believe that 1 in every 6 cases is fraudulent. Okay. So the thing is, our experts feel that, and a lot of U.S. citizen petitioners by the thousands feel that most of the denials are mistakes. So we're going to take a look at this. So this number, if you're, the way we look at it, if you're a reasonably intelligent federal employee doing due diligence in their work, you have to wonder why thousands of people are slipping through the system and you're not catching them, like mostly sham marriages and other types of visa fraud. They're slipping through the system without, by getting approved, and you're still denying 10,000 cases. So doesn't that tell you that something's wrong? So you should be wondering, what cases are we identifying and denying if they're not the criminals? Well, they're the good guys. That's what we're trying to show you in this whole presentation, that thousands of people are slipping through the system, but the government still insists that you deny 1 in every 6. So that's crazy. That's just madness. So this is a graphic that shows you exactly what's going on here. So you have this, you start with the I-129F, and it is designed as a tool to start the indicator process. A lot of the indicators are coming directly from the form. Some are being derived from the form. But the indicators are marking part of a normal distribution of people, a population, and this is the laws of statistics. If you're using some kind of tool to identify, part of the population, and you're doing some demographics on this, that's the law of statistics. That's what you're using there. So the indicator system is meant to pick out people on the fringes, of this normal distribution, people with differences. The problem is that, the target groups, the criminals, first of all, the terrorists, human trafficking, sham marriages, they're all matching up people based on, the requirement to have no indicators, because they don't want to go to jail. So their only, focus here is to match up couples that give them no indicators. So this is how crazy the system works. I mean, the graph you're looking at, the bottom part of this S here with the little red stuff in the middle, you're analyzing the entire population using the laws of statistics, but you're ignoring the fact that the people that are the criminal group that you're looking for, they're intentionally, avoiding indicators of any type. So it's always going to be impossible to find this group using your insane, whole of government approach. So what happens is, the criminals get through. We have a little terrorist guy who gains entry to the United States, gets citizenship, and then the fiancés are being denied, legitimate fiancés. So here's another way of looking at it. So that we have a picture here of a bunch of clergy looking people. They're all in white, they're all good people, and the guy in the middle might be a cardinal or a bishop or something, or if this is Catholic, or I don't know if it's Catholic or Orthodox or what. But anyways, the person on the left is obviously doesn't look like they fit in here. So we have a guy who's in sandals and some black outfit with a hood, and in his right hand he's got an AK-47 and he's got a flag in his left hand. So, to us, he looks kind of jihadi, but the government doesn't see this jihadi guy. What the government sees on the right, what the consular officer sees, the consular officer sees what they are trained to see. And that's, a case with low indicators is automatically going to be approved unless something happens in the interview to tip the consular officer that they're not a legitimate couple. Like maybe, like the terrorist that went in there. Let's say the terrorist didn't know the U.S. Citizen Petitioner at all. So let's say she forgot his name. Well, that would have tipped the consular officer that it's not a legitimate couple, and he would have denied the case. But unless they slip up and do something stupid like that, they're going to get approved. He asked 3 simple questions or 4 simple questions, and if they answer the questions okay, they get approved because low indicators. That's the way the consular officer is trained. If you have high indicators, that's an alarm to the consular officer, even though the exact opposite should be considered. People with high indicators are never criminals, okay? They're legitimate couples. You should be approving all these cases, but you're trained to do otherwise. So if you have high indicators, you go to a crapshoot. Some people get denied, some people get approved. It's not like they're going to deny everybody with high number of indicators, but they're going to take their 1 in 6 quota out of the group that have high indicators. That's what you people are doing. So again, the whole of government approach, it's a system that uses indicators, and no criminals have a high level of indicators. So it's just, all you have to do is take a look at this, take a look at the previous pages of the presentation that we already explained. criminals are never going to have high indicators, and they're the ones that should be denied. New topic, the audits that should be implemented. So I'm going to use this little blue box in the middle for a new term that I'm using, is called the criteria. Okay, so you could look at the criteria as being, the following information: the I-129F form and all the information in it, database information that's derived from the form, in other words, the indicators, contents of the I-129F packet, which could be, airline tickets and pictures of the couple together and stuff like that, receipts from restaurants, background information from the USCIS on both the petitioner and the foreign fiance, and any immigration officer notes, like a note could be from the USCIS, the immigration officer, that maybe there was a denial here, but the U.S. Citizen Petitioner got a waiver, and the waiver fulfilled the request, and then it was approved. And you could see consular notes from the consulate officer. But let's just call all this stuff the criteria, just so I don't have to repeat the stuff I just named every page. So this is what we're calling the criteria. So has this criteria ever been used? Have you ever audited this criteria by bumping it up against known populations of target groups? So this would be something that we being federal government consultants, we would call this, best practices. Okay, so has the criteria ever been bumped up against a population of terrorists to see whether the criteria can identify a terrorist? No, of course it hasn't, because there's no way in hell that you're going to identify a terrorist with this, this criteria. Now this is not really off topic, but we're going on a little side thing here. So this is the INA, the Immigration Nationality Act, and this is Section 104A. It says the Secretary of State, and that's been delegated to the Deputy Secretary of State now, shall be charged with the administration and enforcement of the provisions of this Act and all other immigration and nationality laws relating to the powers, duties, functions of diplomatic and consular officers in the United States. So in other words, the Secretary of State or the Deputy Secretary of State is in charge of setting up the policies and procedures that you guys call the whole of government approach. Okay? Except, the very next phrase, except those powers, duties, and functions conferred upon the consular officers relating to the granting or refusal of visas. Nowadays we call that the approval or denial. But in other words, the consular officer has a final say in the outcome of the case. But the consular officer is also steered by the criteria that was, set in the first part of section, 104A. So 104A has, two kind of parts. One is the things that the Secretary of State is in charge of administering, and the next thing is what the consular officer is in charge of. So let's take a look at consular officers and immigration officers. They're both hired into federal government employment as a grade 5 to 7, and they can earn promotions up to a maximum of GS9. Now, if we take a look at federal grade levels, I copied this and pasted it in here instead of using a chart because it was better. So, but you can look at federal federal grade levels, and it'll show you this exactly same thing. So GS5 and GS7 are entry-level positions. Why, 3 and 4 are not even full-time. They're your part-time college interns that come to work for your senator's office in the summertime. But the entry-level positions are GS5 to GS7. And the law said that, these people are going to be deciding all the cases. So the law says, entry-level people are going to be deciding the cases, which is really the way it needs to be because of the volume. If you take if you consider a global corporation like Boeing, Boeing makes airplanes. It's a really big company. The CFO cannot be charged with all of the, clerical stuff to put together financial reports and to do internal accounting. That's why it goes down a bunch of levels. It goes from the CFO to upper management to, director level people to managers to supervisors, and then finally to the clerical people who are doing all the work. That's what we have here. We have clerical people doing all the work. They're guided by a set of guidelines, but it's the clerical people, the immigration officer and the consulate officer, who are doing the actual work here. So what I'm saying here is, when you bump this up against the population of terrorists, they're not going to have any indicators. Because why? Because they're criminals and they avoid indicators. Like I said, any 10-year-old could beat the system. And then the consular officer has absolutely no chance of detecting a terrorist. Now, we've had our experts, and you'll see our experts later, say, hey, how do you train somebody who's an entry-level person to detect a terrorist? Because what they do is they train their consular officers to maybe look for eye contact and body language a little bit. And, our psychologist just threw that out the window and said there's just no way that a consular officer is going to be able to detect a terrorist. It just cannot happen. They couldn't do it, and maybe if the terrorist came in for a series of meetings with the psychologist, and after a few months they might detect that this person actually wants to kill people, but you're not going to do that with 3 or 4 questions. So this is invalid. So has this criteria ever been bumped up against sham marriages? No. The same deal here. There's no way you're going to detect sham marriages. They're just as hard to detect as a terrorist because they're criminals and everybody's matched, so there are no indicators. So again, you have the USCIS case is approved with no or very few indicators, and the entry-level consular officer, unless this sham marriage person forgets the name of her fiance or does something stupid like that, you're not going to catch these people. It's just impossible. The same with human trafficking. Has this criteria ever been bumped up against the known population of human traffickers? No, of course not. It hasn't been bumped up because, we know they can't detect human traffickers either. So, the same deal here. USCIS is approved, and there's no way the consular officer is going to be able to detect anyone. Basically the consular officer, if there's very little indicators, and if the person can answer a couple basic questions and not look, and actually, convey the thought that they actually are a couple, then they get passed. They get approved. So here's the final group, the fraudulent fiancés. And, I added a couple pictures in here from this crazy show from TLC, this 90-Day Fiancé show. And the reason I did it is every time I go up and look for, green card marriages and stuff like that, or green card fraud, you come up with hits to this crazy show on TLC. So, these are a couple screen prints from the show, and I'm not an expert on this show. I can only handle watching. I've never watched the show. I've only watched some YouTube videos, and I can only handle a couple minutes of that because it's just pure craziness. It's just crazy. But if you see on the bottom here, there's a little screen that I covered up, and it says 90%, this show, 90-Day Fiancé, is 90% green card drama. The reason I covered up the couple that was on the screen is because somebody just made a mistake here and put that heading on the screen when they were showing a couple who's legitimate. The actual couple that was on the screen that I covered up are 2 people in Red Square, a guy that married a Russian girl, and they're not a scam marriage. They're a happily married couple that has kids now, But they were on the screen where it says 90% green card drama, and I wanted to cover them up because that should have never been published. So anyways, there are people here that are shams. They're fraudulent. They came into the country only to get citizenship. And, the way I know that is, that's what everybody says that watches the show. So especially these people in the middle. And, it's crazy. Some of these, like this guy that met this Russian girl that, her purpose is to come to the United States and take all of his money away from him. He met her on some kind of porn site, a pay-per-view porn site. So he was paying her about a minute to, see her over the internet. And then another couple were actually married, and she was a prostitute. You guys don't catch stuff like that. You don't ask questions like that. But, some of these people that get through, you got to wonder. And the ones that, aren't porn people or prostitutes, they're like the biggest mismatches you would ever see in your life, but they still get through the system. So same deal here. These people, they're approved with little or no indicators, and there's no way that the entry-level consular officer, there's no capability to detect, fraudulent fiancés or any other target group. They only have the tools that they're given, and they don't have enough tools to actually, or skills to identify the target groups. So, that just shows you the criteria cannot capture any of these groups. And you got to wonder, why is that criteria even being used? For example, age difference. If age difference can't detect a terrorist or human trafficking or sham marriages or fraudulent fiancés, then why is age difference being used at all as an indicator? These people, they just don't have any sense. So what I'm saying, it's not best practices to be doing what they're doing. So we're going to take a look at the effects of not auditing your work. So this is back to our chart, and you see a pie chart here. And this pie chart represents the proportion basically of approved and denied cases. So 1 in 6, this would be this little pie of denied, the darker blue. This is the number of denied cases. So you have approved is 5 in every 6, denied is 1 in every 6. Okay. Oh, and by the way, the numbers that were published on this chart that you see on the upper left, they have the total workload is 60,895 cases. They refused 22,492, but 12,000 of those that were refused were overcome. That leaves you the important number that's not on the chart, which is the not overcome number of 10,128. In other words, 17% of the population, 1 in every 6. Okay, there's no way to say this nice, and I don't have any incentive to say this nice because, your leadership team, they're just criminal people. They sit around and smoke crack all day, and they come up with this crap, and then they set policies and procedures for you to follow. They need to be in a federal penitentiary, and we're going to help put them there. So this is what they think. They think that this pie chart on the left is accurate. So this pie chart represents the entire population of K-1 visa cases, 60,895 cases. The dark blue is 1/6 of that. That's 10,128 cases. So your crack-smoking idiot leaders think, or like to have you believe, or like to have Congress believe, the Senate Committee on Immigration believe, that they are denying, only the bad people. And, they're capturing all the bad people and they're denying their cases. And then, the Senate Committee on Immigration, they're senators. They're not smart enough to say, what, didn't I just read an article where 1,000 sham marriages, and 70 and another one was, there were 2 of them that were 1,000. Is this just, what is this? They're getting through the system. The senators aren't smart enough to put that together. So they just believe this whole spiel by the leadership team. But your leadership team is arrogant enough to think they don't make mistakes. They're denying 1 in 6 cases and they're capturing all the bad people. Okay, that's what they think. And that's just crazy. That's why they belong in prison. So here's the opposite. We'll just say the opposite is true. All of the approved cases, contains all of the criminals except the very rare circumstance where a criminal, a criminal fraudulent fiance or a criminal sham marriage person, or even a terrorist, forgets the name of their U.S. Citizen Petitioner. They forget their fiance's name. Okay, so we're giving you guys credit for denying, very small percentage of the the actual criminal group, and then we're assuming that almost all of them get through. So the government looks at it one way, that they're not doing anything wrong. They're denying 10,000 people, and they're all the bad guys, and then they're patting themselves on the back and figuring out how much bonus they get for doing stuff like this. Okay. The actual truth is it's probably something in between these two things. Okay, Now we know that the leadership team doesn't follow best practices or science. So we doubt that this 1 in 6 is actually, whoever audited this, unless they went outside and got some consulting company that came up with this. If they came up with this number themselves, we know it's wrong because they can't do anything. These people can't even go to the bathroom by themselves. Okay. So, we know that they ignore best practices in science, so we doubt that that number is right, but we're going to go with that number for now. Okay, we're just going to say, okay, 1 in 6 are bad, 17%, and let's see something realistic here. So what we're assuming here is that this 17%, which is 10,000 people a year that should be denied, 9,000 of them get through. Okay, so that's that. If you ask me, that's a good estimate. If you read the paper, if you read all these, look at all the screens that came before this. It shows all these populations of bad people getting through the system because a 10-year-old could beat this system because morons smoking crack designed this system. Okay, and arrogant morons, not just average morons. So we're saying that 9,000 of them, get through. They get approved out of 10,000. So, in this 9,000, I'll just tell you what the numbers are that I used to make this graph. The 200 or 300 terrorists, they haven't been, we know a lot of terrorists are getting through, or potential terrorists. They just haven't killed anybody yet. But thank God we have other, terrorist task forces that are keeping an eye on them. And, every so often you read about somebody being deported, because of terrorism threats and stuff like that. So we're assuming 5,000 illegal sham marriages, 1,500 cases of human trafficking, and 1,000 cases of fiancés that are planning to scam their U.S. citizen petitioners. So that's what the numbers are that we just threw out there. And that would mean that in the denied cases, out of the, only 1,000 are, actually people that should be denied. And that's giving you guys a lot of credit because, we think that that's actually a really, really small number. If you're a consulate officer, you should know how many times a week somebody comes in and says something obvious, like they don't know their fiance's name. They don't know that they're going to the United States. They don't know what city they're going to be living in. That would be pretty fraudulent. Okay. And we think that's actually a very small percentage. We think that you're denying 9,000 cases because you have to meet a quota, okay? And you might not think, well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what I'm told to do. Well, think of war crimes, okay? World War II. How many Nazis got away with, they incinerated millions of Jewish people, okay? Now, was it only the guy at the top that, that got executed for it? No. They drew the line somewhere, and this will happen the same way. They'll draw the line somewhere. But you consular officers that are saying things like, we're going to deny your case because I don't see a picture of the fiance with the U.S. citizen petitioner's mother, okay? Or I don't, we think that you're already married, so we're going to deny your case. Or, here was one where the fiance knew that her fiance, her U.S. citizen petitioner, soon to be husband, she knew that he was a developer, but she couldn't remember the actual application program that he used. Was it Visual Basic or what? She didn't know. She couldn't name that program, so she got her case denied. Okay, you guys that are looking for stuff like that, you're going to be judged. Okay, and you're going to be judged on the basis of, would an intelligent person doing due diligence have denied that case for that stupid reason? And if not, you're going to losing your job is the least of your worries. You're going to end up in prison, okay, because you did something criminal. You denied the case of a legitimate couple. We don't care if you were told to do it. You're the criminal here. You're doing what you're told, but what you're told, you ought to know that it's criminal. So the courts will sort that stuff out. So we estimated these, 1,000 denials. I'll just tell you some of the figures that I put in here to make this pie chart. There were some terrorists that got through, some sham marriage people, victims of human trafficking. So that's if you look at the pie chart on the right, that's the small areas that are not, dark blue. And that means that the remainder of these couples, 9,728 couples, were bona fide couples, and you denied their fiance visa. Okay, we don't care what the reason was. You're going to be judged for it. We're going to, this is going to be audited. We're going to take a look at your notes and what you said. And, keep in mind when you deny somebody, they get entered into the Department of State criminal database for fraud. Okay. So, you're going to be judged, and we're going to pick, a couple of consulates that we have in mind now are China, because China has a high instance of sham marriages. And we think that it looks like the rate in China is a lot higher than 1 in 6 right now. We don't have the exact numbers naturally. We're just going on the figures that we actually have. So, we're going to take a good look at China. We're going to take a good look at a couple other countries, some South American countries. We'll probably look at the Philippines. Even they used to be referred to as the bunny, the bunny fiance visa, because they were approved automatically. So we're going to take a look at that. And, we're going to start with just a couple of different countries, but it's going to expand over the next few years. You guys are going to be reading about consular officers going to jail for a long time, for years to come. And, consular officers aren't really our target, or neither are their managers. We're going to go after the consulate general. This is the guy with the biggest house and the biggest retirement account and the biggest savings account. That's who the target is going to be. I'm going to help go after them by telling the Department of Justice, you need to look at this person. But after the Department of Justice is done and you're going to start looking at civil lawsuits, I'd hate to be a consulate general somewhere, because you're responsible. It's your consulate. You could have said no. I don't think this is right, because I read about people getting through the system. Why are we denying 10,000? You can't play stupid. If you play stupid, you're going to wind up in prison. So this is just looking at the numbers again. If what we think is true, 9,000 cases are getting approved every year out of the 10,000, that means you should reduce the denials by 9,000. This is not difficult math. It's something. If you take a look at your leadership team and drill into all the names on the leadership team, you'd be surprised. Most of these people that are your leaders have bachelor's degrees in, some kind of, political science or something, that doesn't require a whole lot of math. Okay. They don't know how to do stuff like this. If 9,000 people are getting through, you can't deny 10,000 people. You got to reduce that by 9,000. Here's, because, and let's look at this, 10,000. Say all of the criminal groups are getting through the system. Then if you're still denying 10,000, that's 20,000 altogether. If 10,000 is 1 in 6, 20,000 is 1 in 3. How do you justify that? This is double jeopardy. If you look down there, these are Webster decision or Webster definitions of double jeopardy. Risk or disadvantage incurred from two sources simultaneously. You can't deny 10,000 cases when 10,000 people are slipping through the system. That's way, way higher. That's 1 in 3. That's higher than your own insane, number that you came up with 1 in 6 are supposed to be fraudulent. Here's a chart for you people that are like mathematically challenged. Okay. 10,000, if 10,000 get approved, you shouldn't have any that are denied because all of them are getting through. If 7,000 cases are approved, then you should have 3,000 getting denied. That's 10,000 altogether. That's your target number. Simple stuff. So until proven otherwise, we're just going to go with this 9,000 number, okay? And we're going to just assume that that's what you're doing. You're actually targeting 1 in 3 cases because you're denying a big number of people, and when you know that a big number of people are getting through. And this isn't, best practices. It isn't science. It's just stupid people, arrogant people on smoking crack that, I don't know what their incentive is to put all these bona fide couples to deny the cases of all the bona fide couples. I don't know what their incentive is. Okay, this is slightly off topic, but it's not. It's relevant to what we're talking about. During the introduction of your leadership team, each of the leaders got up there and gave a little spiel about their own organization. And this is Neufeld, who's the Associate Director of Service Center Operations. There's like 7 or 8 of them. I didn't write that down. But they said that their service centers are staffed by 3,681 employees and 1,800 contractors. That means these contractors are federal government consultants, we hope. And of these contractors, of these consultants, there's one for every two. That's a lot, but it's a federal government account. They always have a lot. So what we're saying here is, how can this be that you have that many contractors and they're not doing what we're doing now? They're not screaming and saying, what the hell is this? We're whistleblowers. We're gonna work with the Department of Justice until they start arresting people, because this is bad. We're whistleblowers because we know this is wrong, So we're wondering, why aren't these contractors doing anything? Why aren't they a whistleblower? Aren't they from your big consulting firms? Aren't they from your IBMs and Deloittes of the world? Or are you getting people from India to come over here to work on government accounts? That's not usually typical. But, where are you getting these consultants at? And, what kind of brains do they have? So, we know as federal government consultants that, we're supposed to adhere to best practices, okay? Best practices doesn't support an organization implementing policies and procedures without testing them and auditing them to determine if they work, okay? That's why you people are doing illegal stuff. That's what we're saying. We're federal government consultants. We're blowing the whistle here. That's why, late in 2018, you're going to start hearing about people in the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State getting arrested. So, that's best practices. What about science? So we'll show you science next. So we're going to talk about the scientific method. So you can pause this screen and look at it. But the idea here is in the scientific method, you come up with a hypothesis and you refine that hypothesis through zillions of iterations of testing the hypothesis to see if it works. If you start out with a hypothesis that doesn't work in all target audiences, it doesn't work for all demographics, it doesn't work for all geographics, then you tweak the hypothesis so that it does work. And after you've gone through zillions of iterations, you actually have a hypothesis that's valid. That's the scientific method. So what we're saying is that the government stops with the hypothesis. Their hypothesis is that the whole of government approach works. That's their hypothesis. They never test it against the populations, to see if it works. They just assume that it works. They just assume that these 10,000 denials they're doing every year are to target groups, when in fact, very few of the denials are actually target groups. They're only people that slip up. All of the denials are legitimate couples. So, it's not like the scientific method is mandated for all government people. There's nothing in there that says that the scientific method is mandated. But, just consider NASA. I've worked at NASA as a federal government consultant. So I know that they don't do stuff like this. They don't make a robot and say, okay, we're going to send this robot up to Mars and it's going to take some soil samples and it's going to analyze the soil through some kind of little onboard spectrometer or some kind of onboard, chemical test. And it's going to tell us what the compositions are. And we're going to take it for granted that that's right. They don't do stuff like that. They test a robot on Earth. They test a robot to see if it can detect what the composition is of a soil sample, and then they take that same soil sample and put it through some big-ass machines, big, huge spectrometers, and they do chemical tests on it, and they get the exact composition of that soil sample, and then they see if the robot matches it. They'll test over and over and over to see if the robot can work. Then they send it to Mars. They don't send it to Mars and just take for granted that whatever it says is true. That's the scientific method. It says right here, NASA Now scientific method using robots for inquiry. So you can see here that, test protocols are used. They develop these test protocols first and then they do stuff. That's the scientific method. But like I said, the scientific method isn't mandated for all government organizations. But, we know that the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State, they both have OIGs, which is Office of Inspector General. These people actually should be doing some audits, and they do. If you go up there and search, do a Google search for Department of Homeland Security, OIG, one of the most highly publicized things was, late last year where the OIG came out and, made a statement that they accidentally granted, approval to 814 different cases by mistake. They shouldn't have been approved. So, that's the kind of auditing they do. But they don't go and audit the methodologies that are used by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State. They just audit their work, take a sample size and say, ICE found these people in a, human trafficking ring. They're all prostitutes and they all came over here on a fiance visa, So that's how they do their audits, the OIG. The OIG is not doing audits of the methodologies, and that's, an issue we have with the OIG, both OIGs. So then we have the Department of Homeland Security and Department of State, they're ignoring the science of statistics. So, whether, if you're going to be studying a population and you're going to be retrieving data from that population, you are doing statistics. There's a science that governs the laws of statistics, and the government is ignoring the science because they're using indicators to try to detect a population, a subpopulation of people who are avoiding indicators. That's craziness. It's not backed by science. It has no basis in science. Same with psychology. Psychology is a science, and you're ignoring the laws of psychology. You can't take an entry-level consular officer, no matter how well you train this person, to look for facial expressions or whatever, it's just not going to work. They're not going to be able to detect, a terrorist or a sham marriage. It's never going to happen. The only way that they can detect something is if they slip up and say the wrong thing. That's the only cases that you are actually denying that you should be denying. Okay, this is a new topic. This is something that I just recently added that I think should be a best practice in this whole fiance visa, system. So we have people on our side who are, actually either current members of USCIS and the Department of State or past members. We actually even have some experts who are in federal prisons because these people tend to take a lot of time to talk to you because, they're excited when they get out of their cell to take a phone call or something. So, this is what is happening at the consulate. We know this from talking to consulate people. So when the fiance goes into the interview, first they're handed this paper about the IMBRA, the law that protects fiancés from abuse and stuff like that. Then they go through some interview, it's like 4 or 5 questions. And then they are handed a piece of paper about a consulate officer, either a pink paper or a blue paper or a green paper or a white paper. I don't have the white one here. But the white one might mean your case is approved. Congratulations. You're going to, you're going to get a notification of when to come in and pick up your passport, or it's going to be mailed to you or whatever. So we also know that there is some type of, not a audit, but there's some kind of discussion that the consulate officer manager will have with consulate officers at the end of the week, or maybe the end of every day. So what they do is basically, okay, let's get together and have a meeting, maybe every afternoon around, 4 o'clock, or we'll do it all on Friday between, 3 and 4:30. We're going to review what you did in your cases. And then the manager of the consulate section might say, okay, why did you deny this case? It has all the indicators that, or lacks the indicators, has the indication that it's a legitimate couple. And then the consular officer will say, yeah, but the fiance couldn't remember the name of her U.S. citizen petitioner, or the state that they live in, or the city that they live in. So I denied the case because it's obvious that they don't know each other. And then, consulate manager says, good job. And then they go on to the next case. Well, this is one kind of semi-audit that, we're giving them credit for doing this, but we know for a fact this isn't done everywhere. It's only done maybe at a couple different consulates. But this isn't the kind of audit that we're talking about. So what I'm saying is, we got to remind you that you're public servants, okay? You are having entry-level consular officers give the, using the whole of government approach to deny or approve every case. So you should be stepping it up a notch in your audits to make sure that the right thing is happening. And what I'm saying is you need to go in and do an audit of these couples like a year later or 2 years later or 3 years later. Okay, so here's a chart that I have from another longer presentation. I think this is like from a 600-page presentation. But what I have on the right is a little diamond showing you a decision process where you have ILs, which are I-129F packets with a low number of indicators. So right here on this page, we're going to take a look at everybody that gets approved, okay? And what I'm saying is you should go back and audit and determine if these approvals were correct. Did your consular officer make the correct decision, okay? Not just the correct decision based on the training, was it the correct decision? So if you have a low number of indicators, you fly through the system. You're a happily married couple or you're a criminal, okay? Or you're a dead terrorist. If you have a high number of indicators, you go through this crapshoot called the interview, and you could get approved, you could get denied. You get approved if you don't slip up, maybe, if they already denied a bunch of people that day. So we're going to consider just the approvals here, which are the ones circled in yellow. So what you need to do is go back and do an audit and see if these people that you approve that are circled in yellow, see if they wound up, in some kind of a sham marriage scheme later. They may depress, their name because they got arrested, or because, they're a terrorist that you approved by mistake, or that, they're some kind of human trafficking victims. Have you ever gone through to see if your people that you approved should have been approved? And more importantly, the other way around. So this is the denied cases. Now, you don't get denied if you have low indicators, unless, of course, you're like 1 in 100 that forgets the name of your fiance. So we're talking about doing an audit of denied cases. Now, maybe 2 years later, you go through to see, I denied this couple because there was no, maybe the fiance didn't know the name of the third college that the U.S. Citizen Petitioner went to. So I denied him for that reason because I had to meet a quota, 1 in 6. So have you ever gone back to see what happened to this couple that you denied? So no, you haven't done this because you're corrupt and you're incompetent and you don't remember that you're public servants. You ought to be auditing your work. We did it. We went through and audited these denied cases from 2015, all of them that we could find. So this is what happened. You can read the screen. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but we decided that a wrongfully denied couple in 2015 went through 3 years of hell because it's 2018 now. They accumulated $15,000 in legal expenses, $5,000 a year for maybe 2 vacations in travel expenses, air, hotel, lodging, car rental, dinners, and stuff like that. So, 3 years of $5,000 in travel expenses is $15,000, and then another $50,000 a year of lost income from a spouse. Even an American Citizen Petitioner who marries a Filipina lady, she can get a job in a restaurant and make $50,000 a year easy, and they're out that. So each couple is losing about $180,000, and you guys owe these couples $72 million for 2015. Similarly, in 2016. There's only 2 years here. So, the final number here is $1 billion. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Department of State owes these couples that you screwed up their lives, and they had all kinds of financial issues. And this is just for finances. This doesn't include any punitive damages. So what we're telling you here as a federal government consultant, I'm giving you some advice. After the Department of Justice gets through with their investigation, and then they start, arresting people and trying people and sentencing people and convicting them to prison, those people are going to be, subject to civil suits, class action suits. We don't know how that's going to happen because We don't have anything to do with these. We're just telling you they're coming. Okay. There's only so much time that there's only so long that you can get away with denying the visas of 10,000 people, and those 10,000 people not getting together and getting mad. That's your worst fear. We're accommodating your worst fear now. We're getting these people together, by the hundreds. We're going to have, several thousand people that were wrongfully denied, and they're going to be coming after you. Not because we tell them to, because, they're going to be filing lawsuits. We don't know if it's going to be happening, everybody from, say, the state of Texas that was wrongfully denied, or we don't know if it's going to be people that were all denied in the Philippines or China, and they're going to get together and file a class action suit. We don't know how this is going to work, but you can expect this to happen. So, we have news for you people that, this is going to happen one way or another. These people are going to be coming after your assets and your house and your savings accounts and stuff like that. Because why? Because you should have known what you were doing. You should be able to read the paper and see that thousands of people that you approved are getting through the system, and you're still denying 10,000. That's just craziness. You should know that's wrong. So here I'm going to talk about, we say that there's a quota system for K-1 denials, and you might say, well, there's never been a quota. There's always been a quota. Throughout time, it used to be historically, it used to be 2%. It used to be like 1.92% to 1.97%. I don't think it ever went over 2%. But, and you would just say, well, that's not a quota. That's just a result of our good work. And that's what you're saying now, that the 17% or 1 in every 6 is just a result of our consular officers doing good work. And we say, bullshit, that's a quota. We can prove it's a quota. How can we prove it's a quota? Well, here's a guy. He's a recent acquaintance of mine, Don, who he spent his entire career in the USCIS. And, he was an adjudicator for a while, and then he moved up the ranks, and, before he retired, he started the FDNS. He's the guy that conceived this whole, entity and started it, and he directed it. And that's, Fraud Detection and National Security Initiative, our directorate, FDNS. So, he knows what he's doing. And he mentioned, and there's a YouTube video up there now. I just put a clip in the resolution of fraud cases. In the first minute of this video, he mentions this 17%. Okay, and now it's suddenly in effect. And you're telling me that's not a quota? The thing is, he mentioned this video was in 2013. So it took him 3 years to implement this, but there you see, 17%. And you're saying it's not a quota? Say that in front of Congress. See what they say. They can put your leadership team in a slammer just for lying and saying there's no quota. So, this is about, I'm going to fly through this. You can pause the screen and look at it, but this is a little spiel about our experts. So, I started out this way because why? Because I'm a pretty smart guy with graduate degrees, and, I know how to get experts. If I want to get experts to agree with my thoughts, then I'm going to get some experts from academia, and I'm going to get some from professional organizations that say this is crazy what you guys are doing. So I took a look first at, to get to academics, I looked at the U.S. Senate Committee on Immigration and said, where did you guys go to school? So 4 of them went to Harvard. Okay, that's the Harvard logo on the right. And 4 of them went to Georgetown. Okay. And then, the chair and Feinstein went to Stanford. Believe it or not, Stanford was there when she was college age. She's about 300 years old, I think. So, who did we go to? We went to Harvard. We went to Georgetown. We went to all of those schools. And we wrote to the Department of Statistics and said, hey, what do you think about this? I actually got schooled by one of these Harvard guys on statistics because I said something wrong. And because I didn't remember the mean value theorem. But anyways, he said that, every subgroup inside of your big group has an equal chance of being, difference in age and stuff like that. And I didn't state that right. But the whole idea is they're using the science of statistics to try to find a subpopulation that's avoiding indicators. I'm sorry, they're using indicators to try to identify a subpopulation that's avoiding indicators, and they all said that's crazy. You can't do that. There's nothing that has no basis in science. It's craziness. Same with psychology. What do you think about an entry-level consular officer asking, 3 or 4 or 5 questions and approving or denying a case? And I said, that's crazy. That's not, we couldn't do that. And we're psychologists. And then also, I didn't write to all 4 schools for this. This is the scientific method because I couldn't decide which science department to write to in most of the universities. But Harvard has this department of the history of science. So I wrote to them and said, what do you think about these guys not using the scientific method, to find a population? They're just assuming that their hypothesis works. So we also have people from professional organizations and, people from SCORE, because we're setting up our own consulting group that's going to go in there and straighten out whatever consulting group or groups that are in there now. They're no good. They're not telling you guys that you're not following best practices for government. You're ignoring science. You're putting together this insane system that can't identify the target groups, and then you wind up denying 10,000 legitimate couples every year. And we're just starting to deal with the National Academies of Science. And we've got some people on board from the Department of Justice, an FBI person, and a couple of ICE people. So that's who our clout is. So let's see, new topic: corruption in the federal government. Now, if you happen to think that there's no, I'm going to fly through this too. If you happen to think there's no corruption in the federal government and we're just telling you that the leadership team is corrupt and arrogant and incompetent, maybe you're not going to believe us. But if you read your emails, you believe it. When I go into a federal government organization to start doing consulting, I get my own consulting emails and I get everything that goes to the federal employees. So I know that you guys know that a lot of people get arrested every year. Okay, so you should believe us when we're telling you that you're corrupt. You've got corrupt people working with you. So we have in our longer presentations, like I said, I'm going to fly through this. We have like 10 or 20 pages of each one of these where the USCIS is in black and red. And we're showing you, this is the Department of Justice, both of these. On the left, this person was arrested for fraud. On the right, for bribes. On the right, this person was arrested for bribes again. So we have, 2 USCIS people, and there's 20 of them in our longer videos. There's also 20 ICE people that get arrested and convicted and sentenced to prison. There's also people from DHS. This one happens to be the guy that ran the OIG. He's still in the slammer today, because he was arrested and convicted of corruption. Department of State, they take corruption to another level. They do everything that everybody else does. They take bribes, but they also have crimes against America. You're going to hear about this one case this year. I covered up to date March 29th, but that was 2017, and this hasn't gone to trial yet, so you'll hear about this person. And here's another one, Department of State, convicted or being tried for espionage, charged with espionage. So yes, there are corrupt people. There's corrupt congressmen. Shouldn't have to convince you of that. They get arrested for everything, for taking bribes, like you see here, for sex scandals, for illegal contributions, for you name it. Senators and representatives are, they're uber corrupt. And then here's if you go up to the Department of Justice homepage, you can see a link for reports to Congress. And this is a particular report here that comes out from the public integrity section. So public integrity means, as a consultant, we look at, we're either working on a public sector group or a private sector, project. Private sector would be all your big global businesses, and public sector would be federal government, So I'm showing you a little page here published by the Department of Justice that shows you how many people in the federal government they arrest every year. So we have 458 charged, 402 convicted, 153 awaiting trial. So don't tell me that there's nobody corrupt in the federal government. It's full of corruption. And this is proof. All the pages that I've showed you so far are proof. Google it, research yourself. You'll find that same stuff. And of course, the public's view of Congress isn't very good and declining. So you should be able to believe me now that, there's some people that are corrupt, and these corrupt people are part of your leadership team, Department of Homeland Security and Department of State leadership team. So our advice, this, we're giving you this whole long spiel to give you some advice here at the end. And one thing, you might be thinking, how can I be liable for doing my job? Well, we can prove that you're liable. If you're an adjudicator, let's say if you're in the Department of State and you just denied a bunch of cases today and wrote down in your notes that you didn't see a picture of the fiance with the U.S. Citizen Petitioner's mom, and you don't actually write down, I have to meet a quota, but we can prove that. We can prove that no sane person doing your job and doing due diligence would have denied this case based on nothing because you had to meet a quota. We can prove that. We'll haul your ass into court and prove that. Not us, the Department of Justice. We're just going to give the Department of Justice names and examples, and they'll haul your ass into court. So yeah, you can be liable for doing your job. So here's what we suggest you do. If you're some kind of decision maker in this process, you should call the OIG now. If you work for the Department of Homeland Security, call their OIG, Office of Inspector General. Just Google them. Department of State has an OIG. Call them first. Tell them that you're a whistleblower. They have some nice little videos up there. I just got through watching one from the Department of State. They have a video of a person calling in and saying this might be corrupt, but I'm not sure. How would I be protected? And they have a couple videos. Just watch the videos. You can call in and talk to these people. They're not going to arrest you. They're going to protect you. That's their job. And also you should call the FBI. Why? Because, this might, if you get your name, on an FBI list as a whistleblower, you can just say, hey, I just found out. I just discovered that, what I'm doing is wrong. Call them up and tell them that you want to be a whistleblower. And in here, Google this. You can go up to, Wikipedia and look at this Whistleblower Act of 1990. It's spelled out there. You're protected. Just call the FBI and say, hey, I feel that what I'm doing isn't right. I've been trained to do this, but, I think that we're denying 10,000 legitimate couples every year. There's something wrong with that, something wrong with this picture. Just call them and tell them. Get your name on a list of, whistleblowers so you don't wind up in jail. Okay, that's our advice to you. Do that. So, if you're a decision maker to help set up the system, you could try calling and saying you're a whistleblower, but chances are you're going to be in the slammer. And I say people that are involved, what I mean is, managers, auditors, adjudicators, anyone involved in case decisions is, liable to get called in by the Department of Justice. And we also have a petition that you can sign. We've had some people sign it already. So you can just Google change.org, replace the insane fiance visa process, and you'll come to this. And if you put your name on this, when it comes down to civil cases where people start doing class action suits, we'll at least say that, hey, you're on this list as somebody who felt that the system was doing something wrong. So sign that if you feel like it. And we have a couple of final screens here to remind you, yeah, any 10-year-old could beat the system. You know what the screen is, and you know what the screen is. And that's all we have. I appreciate your time, and I hope you do the right thing.